Well, welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal or Anglican priest living here in Austin, Texas. Celebrated 50 years in recovery not too long back. So I have been at this thing for a long while, and my interest is in trying to help people who are either new to the program or maybe got bored with the program to find some avenues that will open it up for them in a way that they can really relate to and grow from. So we kind of approach it from the angle of psychology, in-depth spirituality, and very much so from the historical point of view, going back and looking at the original program, what some of us call the pioneer program, because there's much there that has been left behind. And the two things that I am probably most interested in that were left behind are two-way prayer. And we just did a nice new video on that. If you haven't seen it, I really encourage you to go to the website, Two-Way Prayer, TWO, and check it out. Runs about 40 minutes, and it's designed to be a good introduction to the practice that is changing many, many lives around the world. I hear from people almost every day how meaningful it has been to them. So don't deny yourself access to that. And the other thing is what we're getting into in this series is the importance and the relevance of the four absolutes, that for the pioneer program people, these were key. And that also has been kind of left behind. So in my remaining days, what God is guiding me to do is get these two things out to the world. And I can't have a better guest for diving into this material than my good friend, Matt D. So I do want to make reference to a couple of things before I introduce Matt, and that is some of the material we're going to be using. Matt is in charge of All Addicts Anonymous, and specifically, he's very much in charge of their archives. So down in some hidden room there, he's got stored away some really, really important material. And we're gonna look at that material today, and so for this series, there's always a little homework assignment. And that is to go and read or listen to whatever Matt brings up from the basement there. Going to be two things we're going to bounce off of in this episode. The first is Invitation to a Great Experiment. That's Tom Power's book. And I think we did a series on that a while back. Might put a link to that in the show notes. There is a link to the book itself on PDF version. And we're going to be doing, I think it's pages 10 to 22 or so. And the other thing we're going to look at is a talk that Tom Powers delivered, I believe it was in 1961. It's known as the Blackstone Talk, and it's all about honesty, and it's all about sanity and how he links the two things together. So that is our subject. We're going through the four absolutes, and we're starting with honesty, because without honesty, the other three absolutes are not going to happen. So it is key. And Matt, welcome back. Good to have you. And give us a little bit of background, if you will, about Tom's book, Invitation, and also a little background on this talk on sanity.
Sure thing. Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so Tom, we talked some about him in last week's discussion on the four absolutes in general. He was an early member of AA, got in 1941. He bounced around quite a bit, primarily because he barred himself from a majority of the aspects of the program, the ones particularly that bring the most relief, and those are the ones that relate to God, and he just couldn't buy that. And eventually it had a spiritual experience and an opening had become a theist, started to be able to work with the program in a whole new way. And by 1946 got on the AA program and was really trying to work this thing at depth, not just, it's an interesting thing. It's, you deal with a particular addiction, but when you relate to God, you don't just, turn the problem of alcoholism over to him. And it's it's your whole life that you're relating to God with. Anyway, that became his approach, not because he was trying to be a good person per se, but because it was out of necessity. He was really trying to save his life. He had a background in advertising. He was an advertising executive, was a writer, editor, copy editor, and actually was involved quite a bit with the editing and also ghostwriting of some of the major books for AA, like the 12 and 12 and AA Comes of Age, and was the primary editor for the second edition of the Big Book. And during that decade, the 1950s, towards the latter end, he was given a grant from the Layman's Movement to write a book for them, which originally was called First Questions on the Life of the Spirit. They had sent out a questionnaire to their members asking if you had questions about the spiritual life that you wanted answered, what would they be? And so that was the original book, Invitation to a Great Experiment. The name was changed for the second edition, which they did in the 1970s by Doubleday Press. Original was Harper, which Tom and Bill Wilson had a very close relationship with the religious editor over there, Eugene Exman, instrumental at helping with the Big Book getting published, and also giving Bill Wilson guidance on having AA publish that book themselves. And then he also helped with the publishing of the 12 and 12 later on. Anyway, the book that Tom had written was primarily to introduce people to the spiritual life, but particularly in I guess I'd say cloak and dagger form of the 12-step process. I mean, the 12-step process really mimics any spiritual conversion that occurs. Really, there are these hallmark things that happen. Usually there's deflation at a certain, at depth, and there's a process of certainly of what the topic we're going to talk about today, which is relating to the truth. Very often that's the initiating kind of aspects, lighting the fuse of the cannon, if you will, is relating to the truth, and leads to a complete life change. Anyway, so Tom had written that book at that time. It answers a lot of these questions, or it points you to the answers. He doesn't try to answer them all himself, if you will, but that was in the 1950s. And the book is, again, I feel like the book very much also replicates the experience of going through the 12-step process. And it starts off with the subject, which everybody has to start off with. This is the first place to begin.
The honesty place, yeah.
It's
And what about the Blackstone talk? I've probably listened to that 7, 8, 10 times. I always enjoy it and get something more from it. It's kind of a classic, isn't it?
It is. It's I sure wish it was more well known now. I think it's just anybody could listen to it at any time. And it was recorded in 1961. There was a time period where Tom was doing a lot of these AA talks around the country and Canada. He also was doing spiritual retreats as well. So, if he went to a spiritual retreat, he would be talking more of the subjects that were in Invitation to a Great Experiment, but he would definitely funnel that into his AA talks as well. And this is one of those very key talks that he gives. And it's primarily on the subject of sanity. But it goes into great depth, the relationship between honesty and sanity, and how those things are intrinsically tied together. And I recommend it to everybody. I mean, it's just such a key talk, so critical and so important and so basic.
It's root, as Tom would say on the talk. And I am telling you guys, if you don't download this, it's in the show notes. Listen to the full tape. There's also a written version, but it's not the full tape on the written version. But I want you to listen to it, and it can be life-changing for you. So that's what we're going to kind of build this episode around. And when I was doing my preparation for the interview, it struck me that there were two elements here that needed to be untangled. And one was honesty as it relates to the particular addiction to alcohol or drugs. And that's important. But there was also a deeper message that was trying to come through, and that is one's relationship to the truth with a capital T. And Pilate, I was reminded of Pilate purportedly saying to Jesus, "What is truth?" And so I'm going to put that question now to Matt. And Jesus was kind of silent, but I don't think Matt will be. So, Matt, what is truth, and what's it important to relate to it?
I'm over here washing my hands as we speak.
If you're not good, I'm going to ask for Barabbas, and I'll interview him. So be careful, guys.
I think you're exactly right. The 12. I'm gonna hopefully get to that, but you really do relate to the truth. You start off where you're at, and if you go back, I'm just going to mention this, the very beginning of this, thing that really set off the explosion of this program, which has revolutionized humanity. I mean, people now have a way to go with addiction that they did not have 100 years ago. And the very beginning was, in a way, was Evie Thatcher saying to Bill Wilson, "You got to get honest with yourself." There's honesty. My first beginning introduction to honesty was cash register type honesty, data, giving the proper, if something was a certain color and somebody asked you what the color was, you said what it was. You didn't give a different color. On the one end of the spectrum, it's something very basic like that, and everybody knows what that is. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, which is it has no ceiling. It is this connection to God Himself. The truth is an attribute of God, and the small truth, maybe something at the cash register level. On the other end, it is the Holy Spirit of truth, which, I think one of the things that I find very interesting, this learn where religious people are right, or see where religious people are right. The Holy Spirit of truth, a name for that is the Comforter. And, I think when this thing relates to addictive lifestyles, it's like your whole life you're running around looking for comfort. You're looking for peace of mind. You're looking for ease. But man, you do never think to look for it in getting honest with yourself and telling the truth to someone else. And when you do, you're introduced to comfort in a whole new way that you were searching for.
We're made to be in relationship to that, and we're not. When we are not, there is this discomfort, this ill at ease, dis-ease, if you want.
Yes.
That creeps in. It's automatic. It's automatic.
It is automatic. And we are made for it, and we're built for it. And when you're deprived of it, it affects your sanity.
Right. And most of us, I mean, we'll get into this later, but I mean, most of us grow up I grew up in a family where truth was to be avoided at all costs.
Yeah. Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
my father's alcoholism was denied and pushed aside. We had to present ourselves to the community in such a way, and if you ever broke that bond with the family over when it came into conflict with the truth, you got in trouble.
Yes.
It's like,
Yeah.
lie. We want you to lie. And I got
remember,
pretty good at it. And I guess every addict gets really good at it, huh?
they do get good at it, and also, or they at least they work hard at trying to get good at it. There are some addicts that are
not so good,
not so good at it. Fortunately for themselves, that's the case. But I remember Tom saying that lying was natural. It's just such a regular part of the human scene, but truth telling is supernatural. It really again, maybe this is touching on the aspect of God as truth, but it's like you really do need help from above to tell the truth. Now, when early, I think everybody's got their own. I don't mean to put everybody in my own camp, but I think everybody has an experience early on of you tell the truth, or you say a particular thing, and then you see this instant result of what you consider to be getting in trouble. And there's a quick association with, I say this thing and then this thing happens, this distasteful or not what I would hope for. And then you button your lip, you keep your mouth shut, and you eventually learn, the art of how would you say it? The art of getting in and out and around the truth to suit yourself and for your own convenience, and so that things, work out the way that you want them to. And really, the idea of telling the truth or something it becomes, it's the last thing that you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Right. And as addicts, we know we build up a vast volume of lies. We're living a lie. I was certainly living a lie. I'm studying to become a Jesuit priest. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm dragging gallons of wine back to my room, getting drunk, hanging around with people I shouldn't be hanging around with. And a crisis comes. A crisis with the truth of what my real situation is. And Tom says that's an opportunity for change. And they aren't that frequent, but they're blessed in a certain way. Why do you think that is?
The crisis thing is key, because the fact of the matter is it interrupts the whole process, and gives you an opportunity to actually, I think it gives you an opportunity to accept the truth. The fact of the matter is that the last thing an addict wants to do is make themselves vulnerable. I had always, I always found ways to be able to get out of things. It was a kind of a
we are
family
resourceful
joke.
Aren't we? We're very resourceful.
Extremely resourceful. It was a kind of a family joke that we used to have a family cleaning night, and somehow cleaning night I disappeared. It was like, this is how it's like Frodo's ring or something. I'd slip it on. But this is how addicts relate to things, and they use the truth in that way. I guess I was telling a story about my grandfather, who was gets this job during the Depression in a wood shop, and if you screwed up on a board, that you're working with on a piece of wood, you were fired. And there's one guy in the shop that's been there the longest time, and I guess people would lose their jobs on a regular basis. And he set out to watch this guy so he could do exactly what the guy was doing. And he's watching over, and all of a sudden the guy, this veteran at this wood shop, screws up on a board. And my grandfather's thinking, now what is he going to do? And all of a sudden he's, I guess it's either a plane or a lathe. I'm not a carpenter. I don't know the difference. Anyway, the guy runs the piece of board right through the machine. And there's a pile of wood shavings on the ground. And he goes and he picks up another board and keeps going. And that was how I related to lying. It was like anytime I never, once I discovered lying, I hardly ever made a mistake again.
I sometimes lied just to stay in shape. Would have been just as easy to tell the truth.
Yep, very much. And this just becomes a regular part of an addict's, an addict's life. Mm-hmm. And then you need the crisis, because you form a dependency on this ability. It is like the ring, it's like you form this kind of reliance on it. It becomes a tool to you to navigate through life. And I think another thing happens, that correspondingly to the degree that you start to lie, you in your relationship to spiritual maturity is stunted, because life requires facing things to build spiritual muscle. There's a certain kind of muscle that develops spiritually when you face things responsibly. And when you keep dodging over and over again, you become very, you're adept at dealing with life circumstances. And equally, you become afraid. You become afraid of the very things that you won't face, and fear builds. Right. And, I'm going to go in and tell the truth on myself. My God, you become, it's not just I'm doing this thing because it helps me get what I want. You're also equally afraid of what it might mean, the lack of actual courage that occurs when you don't face life responsibly. And you need something where everything crashes down and you can start kind of, look at this thing in a new way, come at it in a fresh way, you hope. And if you're an addict, you start off with, the first place you start off with is getting on, it's this thing, get honest with yourself, but particularly get honest with yourself about your addiction. Where is it that you're killing yourself? If you started off with, I'm going to get honest about how I bite my fingernails or something like that, that's fine, but that isn't what you need. You critically need to get honest about your addiction, and no addict will do that until he is painted into a corner. This position that he's been using lying to prevent from happening, although, till then. And when the crisis comes, you actually have a chance, as Tom says in his talk, that the liar becomes paralyzed for a period, right?
Talk about the liar, Matt. Who is the liar? What is that a reference to?
Yeah, well, I think just like, what is truth? And you've got this very basic, rudimentary, you start with cash register type honesty. And then, of course, on the other end is God himself. I think it's a similar thing in regards to lying. It's these basic rudimentary lies that we tell to ourselves. And on the other end is you can call it any kind of name that you want. The monkey, the evil urge, the devil himself, which is the corrupter of truth. The false lights is the name. It is this thing within that talks back to the truth.
So the great reality, the big book says the great reality is within, but we need to be really careful because there's something else within.
There's something else that talks back to the truth within you.
Yeah.
Except for at times when there's a crisis.
And in the crisis, the liar is kind of stunned, shocked out of.
Yes.
And that's the opportunity.
That's the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The hold that this thing has on your neck lets up for just a period of time, a very brief and very important critical time.
Yeah, I had an insight when my bottom came in Cleveland, that the truth I had to face was two things. One was don't drink, and there was another voice telling me that, and it was also saying something else. Don't run, because I was big on the geographical cure. I would just change my location and start all over again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was stopped. And boy, I can relate to, I mean, I'll never forget those moments. Everything fell apart. My ego structure fell apart. And I was naked and lost and vulnerable as hell. And I did not like it. But that was the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the geographical cure is lying with track shoes on. You know, it's like the things get rough, and you go. You know, you run away.
Right.
Now you can do that, of course, geographically, but you can also do geographical mental, you know, cures, and when you can also do psychological graphic, you know, cures. The mental version is, you know, most courses fantasy, or that's a mental, you know, that's just a mental thing itself. It can also be, of course, done with substances like alcohol. I mean, alcohol in its way is a substance version of a geographical cure. You know, so there are many ways that you do it. It's a form of dodging reality. It's a form of dodging the truth.
The great reality. You know, I think that's one of the most important lines in the big book, that they were inspired to capitalize the great reality. Yeah, because that's what we're talking about.
It is, and it's kind of like the I think that the Hounds of Heaven or something. You know, it's like this is it's an inescapable thing. It's, you know, it is there, and it is tracking you down. I think
right. I think I'm going to get away, and ultimately, maybe the greatest truth is death. You know, if I'm lucid at that moment, it's almost like my ego says, "Oops."
Yeah, well, the death experience is the time where the liar is not just incapacitated, but it's dead. Now you face the truth, you know, capital T. You know, you're.
That's right, and there's some who say if you're not aware at a very deep level of the ability of the addiction to kill you, you're not really in touch with the addiction.
Yeah,
might hurt me, might disable me a little bit, you know. No, it's going to kill you.
Yeah.
And in one sense, that's exactly what it's out to do.
I had a sponsor who used to say that the real function of the 10-step. Now, this is, you know, for those in the audience that are, this may not be a view that's accepted by everyone, but it really was helpful to me. He said the function of the 10-step was this thing of learning how to meet the truth and not faint. In essence, it was preparation for death. You know, there historically it's given that, you know, you die and you have to give an account for yourself. And if I at all, if my life here is a representation of that account, I got a lot of work to do, you know, because when the truth does come, and it comes all the time in different ways, it's still ingrained in me to try to smooth off the edges, or to try to deny it, or to try to justify it. And really the 10th step is a preparation for our meeting with the truth, and how to address ourselves to it without fainting or running.
There's power in the truth. It's almost like electricity. And either I am connected to that truth, in contact with that truth, or my battery starts to wear down. I get depressed, worried, anxious, all of that stuff. And that's what I have to keep in touch with. Am I in touch with the truth, with God? All right. Each one of the absolutes, you said earlier that this is an attribute of God. Well, every one of the absolutes, that's how it came about. I mean, we'll get into the history later, but each one was that God is honest, God is pure, God is unselfish, God is loving. And I have to be in conscious contact, conscious connection with that, or I suffer.
Yeah, I think that the thing that you're saying about power, it's like when you look at the 12 steps, there's reference to power a couple of times, and there's powerless in the first step. Later on, there's the power. This is in relationship to the knowledge of God's will for you and the power to carry it out.
Right.
Right. I think that's the thing. That's the thing that sanity is. Sanity is, it's a power. And there was this campaign, I guess, in the 80s, this whole thing of like saying no to drugs, and it's like, well, anybody who's in the 12-step program knows it's really, it's not that simple. You don't just say, you wake up, in full-blown addiction and say, I'm going to say no to this thing. Because there you have, it's, again, it relates to power. Sanity itself is power. The will with the combination of sanity is a very different thing than the will with a combination of insanity. I mean, it's completely different. There is a power behind sanity that allows you a day at a time to say no to that first drink. If you don't have that sanity, you can't say no to that first drink. And you can't have that sanity if you haven't gotten honest with yourself and are relating to the truth. Period.
Right. And that brings us really to the heart and soul of the Blackstone talk, because this is where Tom lays that out beautifully, I think. And it is so important. He makes the distinction there that, what is the most insane thing an alcoholic can do? It's drink. What's the most normal thing that an alcoholic is going to do? It's drink. And he dives into what's going on there. He makes a very important point, and you're kind of referencing this. It's around the word power. It's around the word power, and he says, I'm not interested in craving. Yes, an alcoholic drinks because there's physical craving going on. And that's the drink taking a drink. Once I've started that process, it's ongoing. Someone who's got diarrhea, they don't say, why am I going to the bathroom all the time? They just run like hell, all right? It has taken you. But he was interested in what happens after a person has some time in sobriety, when the alcohol is out of the system. What are we talking about there? You're 6 months, you're a year, you're 5 years away from the last drink. We're not talking physical there. We're talking mental obsession that really runs deep in addiction. And that's what has to be faced on a daily basis. This is Bill Wilson, the story in the big book, when he goes to Staten Island and he's going to play golf, and he's been out of the hospital for a while and he's sober, and then he's with this guy. It's Armistice Day. He takes the drink. Fellow, you must be nuts. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. So this sanity piece, it's the jaywalker story too. I mean, that's what they're trying to get to there. What is this thing inside of us? And I go a little crazy. I was taught by some people who were, I think they were really influenced by the Pioneer program, looking back at it. You know, Bill, what's the difference between being powerless over alcohol and your life being unmanageable? Most people in AA and most of the 12-step fellowships, I think they miss the message on this. To me, to be powerless over alcohol means I've got an allergy. That's Silkworth's theory, that when I drink, listen, this is what's going to happen. It's going to trigger that craving. All right. But I got another part of me, and this is the spiritual part of me, that my life has become unmanageable. Doesn't mean I get a DWI. Doesn't mean I go to jail. Doesn't mean I get a divorce. It means I've got this insanity living inside of me, waiting inside of me. And if it's not connected to this power, look out. So we get confused over the power word. But I was taught, and it's an Oxford group word, unmanageable. Lord, I can't manage my life. Manage it for me. Connect with that power, and in a relationship of management of who's in charge. Who's in charge? Does that fly with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he really does cover it very well in that talk. I mean, craving is just, there's the instinctive moving function of the human being. It's just been hijacked and taken over. And as he says, craving in its own way is sane. That's the body's,
doing what it should do.
Yeah, metabolic reaction to being hijacked by a substance. The other is the obsessive notion that you can continue to do what you're doing, and somehow,
you can continue to be in charge.
You can continue to be in charge, right? And the liar is the thing that is in the teeth of all truth to the contrary, is telling you, buck up, kid, you can keep doing this thing. You're going to be okay. We're going to work this out. It'll be better tomorrow. Right. It's that's the part that's where the insanity is connected to. The disease of addiction is a psychophysical disease, and the instinctive craving part is just the beast part of the person. It isn't the angelic or spirit part. The spirit part connects to the thing of the truth, and that's essentially where the problem lies, right? So yeah, absolutely.
That's it. And I didn't. I was kind of taught that, but then when I started digging into the history, because it always struck me, Matt, as what an unusual word to choose. Our lives had become unmanageable. I never used that word before I came into AA.
Yeah.
It's a massive, screwed up man. All sorts of words, but unmanageable. It's pointing to something very different. That's why I go a little crazy when people say I'm powerless over people, places, and things. Something in me just goes nuts.
Yeah.
Because I'd better look at alcohol in a different light. I'm powerless over arsenic, but I don't go to Arsenics Anonymous. I have no need for it. I stay the hell away from arsenic. All right? But I'm powerless over alcohol, and I go to it. And I go to it when I'm not drinking. I go to it when I'm sober. And this is the madness. This is who's managing your life, Bill? Is it you? Is it you in connection with the liar? Or is it you in connection with me? And then, like we're saying, this power is able to come through to do for us what we can't do for ourselves. I've never seen it spelled out as clearly as Tom does in that talk.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Also, one of the things you're saying made me think, there was an old timer I used to know in the program. He's now deceased, and he used to say about this thing of unmanageability. He said, when I first got in the program, unmanageability was razor thin. He said, I didn't have anything to manage. I didn't have rent. My family, I had been written off by my family. I had no friends. I had no money. He said, now I've been in the program for X amount of years, and I've got a job. I think he had at the time 7 or 8 kids. is help running, all kinds of things. It's like unmanageable. The possibility of an unmanageability is it changes with the responsibility of life. And you get on this program, unmanageability is the thing. That's when you can have an experience of unmanageability. Prior to that, it's very minimal.
Yeah.
Very minimal.
And that's all I could handle was minimal in the beginning.
Exactly. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
That's funny. And it's true.
Yes.
When you hit the truth, you either laugh or you cry, kind of a good indicator that you're in touch with it.
Yep, that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. Both can be very healing, but and then of course, obviously it depends on what you do with that, from there.
Right. Let's talk about day-to-day practical honesty as a principle, as one of the four absolutes. It isn't, people, and this is what I love about Tom's book. He says, don't take offense, please, but you're a liar, and I'm a liar, all right? And this honesty thing isn't, just going to descend on me from above, and now I've got it. No, it's an ongoing, lifelong direction that I'm moving in the direction of truth, or I'm not.
Yeah.
It's day to day. It's really moment to moment. It's more than day to day.
It is. Also, he points out in the book there that if you aren't willing to relate to this, you do not qualify in the pursuit of knowledge of God. If you're taking this in a general spiritual life kind of way, if you take it in a 12-step kind of way, you don't qualify for recovery. I mean, it's that simple. It's very, very basic. And to get to the practical, I'm glad you mentioned the practical part, because if it isn't for that, then it's a lot of talk of theory and morals and things like that. I think the first thing that a person should, would relate to this thing is to make up, I know it sounds funny, but is to make up your mind that you're going to try to practice honesty, that you're going to try to relate to this thing, that, sit down, address the truth, if whatever way you can, and say,
that's the purpose of the morning quiet time in my book.
It is exactly that you sit down and approach this thing and say, I will attempt to experiment with this thing called the truth, and I'm signing on the dotted line here. I'm your man in regards to this thing today. Help me, make up your mind that you're going to do it. And then as you go out, probably it won't be more than a few minutes, you will find, not that you are an honest person, but you will find this exact thing, that you are not an honest person. Right. And that's where you start. And it's everything from, you were on the phone with your wife on the way to work, and you said you were at such and such place and you weren't, or you are actually gonna take your time and not show up to work exactly on time because the boss isn't going to be there till later, or whatever. You find the places in your life, and they are you were saying it's minute by minute, there are so many places in your life in which you can fudge in regards to the truth, and you work towards not fudging in those places. And the great thing about honesty is that when you break it, which you will, or when you bend it or fudge it or whatever, smooth off the rough edges, you can go back to it. You can make things right at that time with it.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so important that there's be an understanding of the absolutes, that they're a direction in which I am moving, striving to grow in, but failing. If I set the standard half-assed, halfway, yeah, I can get through it. But if I do what you're suggesting, to really do rigorous, absolute honesty on a daily basis, then, and maybe only then, am I going to uncover the depth of the liar within me. It's the only way. Otherwise, I'll never get to it until there's another crisis.
But the good news is that it's like the account of the woman that touched Christ's garment. You only have to touch the hem of this thing. The truth is such a powerful commodity in God's realm that just touching the hem of it, and there's a powerful alteration that can occur in the life of a person, which, again, it's so that's exactly where we're at. We are so weak in the beginning, and so, inept at telling the truth, and so afraid, and so many years of avoiding the truth, and lack the courage. Just a tiny little effort towards making contact with this thing, and things begin to change.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, maybe some of your listeners have knowledge of Latin. I don't. But the original word for heart comes from the word core, and courage comes from that very thing. And you get courage when you tell the truth, when you actually become willing to tell the truth and to deal with whatever may come out of it. Again, the facing the truth is always got a barrier of fear wrapped around it. And when you actually break through and make a little bit of contact, it starts to give you heart. It starts to give you courage. It starts to give you strength. And you don't have that. And an addict desperately lacks that and needs it. And that's why I think the truth is a central part at getting the strength you need a day at a time. Firstly, not to indulge in this addictive substance.
Mm-hmm.
Or behavior, and it's also the very thing you need to be there for you when the liar is talking to you and trying to, we don't really need to do our prayer time, or I don't really need to call my sponsor, or I did that thing a few days ago, nothing bad has happened yet, I'll be fine, I don't need to tell anyone. Or when the liar is talking to you in that way.
My liar liked to quote scripture. Take a little wine for thy stomach's sake. Thought that was a particularly good one.
The liar is known to quote scripture, and
yes, that's right. That's right. You're talking about courage. I always I want to dabble with things. The four absolutes, for example. I would add a fifth. And not a fifth of whiskey, but and it would be courage. If there were to be a fifth absolute, it would be courage. Because that's what I have to be in touch with, and like you're saying, it comes the strength, the power, lack of power was our dilemma. Where's it going to come from? It's going to come from outside of the ego. And this is what introduces me to what Jung would say is not the little self, but the greater self, the great reality that's within, the greater personality, the self that I was meant to be as we started off this discussion. And you go back to Genesis, it starts with a lie, It all starts with a lie. Did you eat the apple? Well, she made me do it, She said, well, the snake made me do it. When we want to pass the buck, rather than say, yeah, I ate the apple. Okay. What are you trying to be? It's kind of the story it's like discovering your kids, they get into your clothes and they put them on. And they're trying to be you. Got the hat, the coat, standing 3 feet high. They laugh. I think God would have laughed in the story. But we lie. And so we get thrown out of the kingdom. And that's what that story is trying to tell you. Hey, what is this human condition? We're out of the kingdom. We're not in conscious contact with that which we were in conscious contact with and delighting in and want to get back to. How do you get back there? Well, that's recovery.
Yeah, hence the term, restore to sanity. It means to go back to where we were. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the crisis is the thing that paralyzes the ego. But the truth is the thing. The truth is the thing that that helps keep it in check from there. So when you do have a crisis experience, it is key to capitalize on it. But from there, if you aren't willing to address yourself to the truth, if you aren't practicing, the 10th step on a regular basis, and the big book mentions if you've got a business to tell somebody something, do it immediately. If you aren't working with the truth on a regular basis, then this thing will revive.
Yeah.
It's just how it works.
Truth is like the oxygen. I mean, whatever analogy you want to use, I've got to be in relationship with it.
Yes.
Or I'm heading to death.
Yes.
One way or another.
Practically speaking, to relate to this thing of relate to the truth, it means you set out to live a day at a time, not telling any lies, admitting them when they come up.
Right.
Practicing, I don't mean to call it an exercise, but you do a 10 step on a regular basis and you review yourself. You go. Another very powerful thing in this process, when we talk about the Pioneers program, that their thing in the Oxford group was restoration, really making amends, making things right, and when you break the truth, you go and make it right.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what. Obviously, the 12-step program has got something built into it in the way of guidance of how you relate to making amends if it's going to cause harm to someone, and you work this out with somebody else who can help you relate to the truth in an important way. But you go and make amends. You go to make this thing right. And the other thing is that the other person is critical. Nobody learns the art of truth telling in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. You got to have somebody else. I can't tell you how many times I thought I was on the right track and another person came along and very nicely and gently said in their own way, I think you're full of crap. And it's so useful. A lot of people really want to do an end run around that. It's me and God. We're buds. I don't need anyone else. And right. In certain ways, that's very important to learn how, as Dr. Bob points out, how to learn the art of truth telling without having to involve other people. He was talking about using the 4 absolutes as a filter for figuring out a particular problem in your life. That's important and critical, but you also need another person at times, and you cannot do it without the help of another person or a group, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our ability to self-delusion is infinite.
It is infinite.
There you go. Well, listen, this was, I thought this was going to be an important episode, and I think it was. I think we tackled a really important piece of the first of the 4 absolutes, why it's critical, what it's about. I want you guys to be sure to go listen to the full Blackstone talk that's in the show notes there. And next week, we're going to tackle purity. And this is the one that scares the hell out of, addicts. Whenever I talk about the 4 absolutes, there's honesty. Yeah, unselfish. Oh, that's a good thing. Purity. You're messing with my sex life, So we're going to dive into that. If you have the courage, come on back next time, and Matt will be here, and he'll spell that out for us, and I'll look forward to that. Matt, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And if you want to get in touch with Matt, there's a link in the show notes as well. Also a link to All Addicts Anonymous meetings that you can attend. And I think you'll really enjoy those. So I thank Matt for joining. I thank you guys for listening. Get honest and keep coming back.